Earlier this year, I talked about the data and the research that suggests that ChatGPT is bad for learning, in part because it offloads critical thinking to an algorithm, leading kids unable to evaluate sources and truly understand what it is that they are reading or watching or otherwise consuming. But of course, it's not just kids who are using AI tools that way. It's also adults. And some of those adults who are offloading their critical thinking skills carry guns and have the ability to arrest people. That's right. Today we're talking about the algorithms used by cops to violate your privacy and terrorize innocent people. They're called automated license plate readers, or ALPRs, and you may be more familiar with one of the largest sellers of ALPRs, Flock. I first learned about ALPRs when I moved to Alameda, California, which is an island in San Francisco Bay that can only be accessed by ferry or by driving through a tunnel or over a bridge from Oakland. I loved Alameda, but it did have a slight NIMBY problem. People who were terrified of poor Black Oaklanders coming to Alameda to do crimes. Or to do anything, really. Go to the beach, whatever. But especially crimes. And so the city council looked to Piedmont, which is another wealthy community that's surrounded by Oakland, who installed ALPRs in order to track people traveling in and out of their enclave. Funny enough, the Yimbys won that fight, while Oakland itself, where I now live, actually decided to sign up for Flock cameras last year with no input from voters. There are currently about 300 Flock cameras mounted to poles around Oakland, and the police department is actively trying to give millions more of taxpayer dollars to the company to expand the program. Luckily, enough voters and city council members and other people are now educated enough about it that the police department is currently losing that fight. Why do I sound so pleased with that? Well, because hold on to your monocles, Flock is actually an authoritarian nightmare with zero evidence to suggest that it does anything to reduce or solve crime. Okay, I know that's probably not super surprising to any of you who already watched my video from 2022 about ShotSpotter, a similar technology that promised to keep us safe by identifying gunshots and alerting police immediately. But in reality, it was used to secretly spy on people's conversations on the street, waste police resources responding to random loud sounds that were not gunshots, and encourage cops to respond to potential crime scenes with excessive violence. Flock is the visual version of ShotSpotter. Cameras take photos of cars that go past, automatically logging the license plate, the make, model, and color of the car, and any notable features like a roof rack or bumper stickers. This information is then logged into Flock's database, where it can be accessed by law enforcement for up to 30 days without a warrant. That part is pretty crucial. It means that a cop can track your movements without proving to anyone that they have a legitimate reason to do so. There's just like a form where it's like, what's the reason? And they're like, meh, whatever. So what's the worst that could happen? Well, in 2022, a police lieutenant in Kansas was caught using Flock to stalk his estranged wife. The newspaper found a private investigator to reassure us that this sort of thing is super rare, but unfortunately they provided zero evidence. Meanwhile, several independent studies have found that up to 40% of police officers admit to abusing their partner. In 2016, an AP investigation found that police officers across the country misuse confidential law enforcement databases to get information on romantic partners, business associates, neighbors, journalists, and others for reasons that have nothing to do with daily police work. They found that law enforcement officers and employees who misused databases were fired, suspended, or resigned more than 325 times between 2013 and 2015. They received reprimands, counseling, or lesser discipline in more than 250 instances. Unspecified discipline was imposed in more than 90 instances reviewed by AP. In many other cases, it wasn't clear from the records if punishment was given at all. The number of violations was surely far higher since records provided were spotty at best and many cases go unnoticed. Among those punished, an Ohio officer who pleaded guilty to stalking an ex-girlfriend and who looked up information on her, a Michigan officer who looked up home addresses of women he found attractive, and 2 Miami-Dade officers who ran checks on a journalist after he aired unflattering stories about the department. They go on to describe the Herculean efforts police departments around the country went to avoid giving them any data at all, claiming they don't keep track or they can't keep track of unauthorized use of these databases by their officers. Even authorized use of these networks can be incredibly problematic. Back in May, 404 Media reported that Texas police used Flock's network of cameras to find a woman because she had allegedly self-administered an abortion, which is illegal in Texas, but not in the other states where they searched for her vehicle, like Washington and Illinois. The cops claimed that they did the search because the woman's family was worried that she would bleed to death, which is an outrageously uncommon outcome of a medical abortion. That's why it wasn't a surprise when 404 reported last month that that was a stupid lie. Newly unearthed court documents about the incident show that when the search was performed, police were conducting a death investigation into the death of the fetus, and police discussed whether they could charge the woman with a crime with the district attorney's office on the same day that they performed the Flock search. The documents, obtained by the Electronic Frontier Foundation and shared with 404 Media, also show that the Flock search was performed more than 2 weeks after the woman had the abortion. The documents were created as part of an arrest affidavit against the woman's partner, who was arrested for allegedly abusing and threatening her at gunpoint on the day she took the abortion pill. In documents created prior to the publication of our article, there is zero mention of concern about the woman's safety. The records show that the police retroactively created a separate document about the Flock search a week after our article was published, in which they justified the search by saying they were concerned for her safety. How interesting that this story also highlights one of the most important reasons to keep abortion legal and easy to access. This woman was apparently in an incredibly abusive relationship, and if she hadn't gotten her abortion, she would have been trapped with a violent armed person and a baby. But I digress. So Flock is bad because cops use it to abuse women without authorization, and they use it to abuse women with authorization. What about when they're investigating something that we can all agree is actually a crime? Well, in 2022, cops in North Carolina were investigating a shooting that left a teenager hospitalized. They used license plate readers to track a white sedan driven by a woman who was bringing a roasted chicken to the funeral of her goddaughter. They arrested her, handcuffed her to a chair, and interrogated her for 4 hours, accusing first her, then her daughter, then her son of committing a drive-by shooting on a day where she was driving around doing funeral preparations. She had to point out to the cops that the car she was driving simply had a hubcap missing, as opposed to the car they were looking for, which was driving on a spare tire. Eventually, they accepted that they had royally fucked up and they let her go. This hero of a woman then sued the police department for $60,000 and won. Her attorney gave the newspaper this incredible quote: "They substitute the technology for thinking critically about the cases." There it is, exactly what we see happening today to kids in school. Why bother thinking when the magic machine does the thinking for you? If you aren't bothered by cops misusing these databases to stalk people for personal reasons, or cops in backward states using them nationwide to stalk people for seeking healthcare or committing thought crimes, or cops using them to avoid doing any actual investigative work, which leads to more innocent people being arrested, tried, and imprisoned for very real crimes, here's one last reason to hate ALPRs. It's not even just cops who may be able to access your personal information. YouTuber Ben Jordan recently published a video so good I almost didn't bother making this video. In it, he covers the reams of research suggesting that Flock cameras are wildly insecure. The steps you take to log into Facebook with two-factor authentication are considered too onerous for law enforcement officers. So it's actually relatively easy for a knowledgeable person to gain access to Flock's databases. Further, Jordan and others got their hands on some of the cameras and were easily able to hack them in a number of ways that should scare you. Flock claims that their cameras are more secure than the ones that they hacked, but they also say a lot of stuff that a less generous person than me would call fucking lies. For instance, Flock claimed last year that a study showed that their cameras were instrumental in solving 10% of reported crime in the United States. But once again, Jason Keebler at 404 Media has the facts. The study was done by Flock employees and given legitimacy with the oversight of 2 academic researchers whose names are also on the paper, one of whom told them that I personally would have done things much differently. Because it turns out that the actual scientists were brought on board at the very end of the quote-unquote study after the Flock employees had already gathered and analyzed data given to them by police departments. Keebler filed a public records request with that researcher's university in order to learn more about how the study was designed. But he found that Flock was fighting to stop the request from going through. And before you think that the scientist in question is brave for coming out and admitting he had nothing to do with this study that was published under his name, here's what else Keebler learned via that records request. Both of the scientists are now working on a new paper in concert with Flock. Flock recommended specific police departments for them to talk to, and an email non-sent to one police department states that he would like to see data that shows a big swing in the data from before Flock's adoption to after Flock's adoption. Yeah, wow, I can't wait to read that paper. I wonder if they're going to find, I don't know, some kind of big swing in the data from before Flock's adoption to after Flock's adoption. That would be wild. It's truly a scientific mystery. Because yeah, even after all of this, there is no compelling data to suggest that these cameras significantly reduce crime or improve cops' ability to close cases. It's just vibes. Jordan's video ends with a call to action that I would like to echo. Call your local and state representatives and tell them that you do not want these surveillance systems installed in your community. And if they're already there, then they must be independently audited by a third party to verify that they are effective at doing the thing they claim to do, that they are secure, and that they aren't being abused by the authorities. Also, support journalists and organizations who are fighting this. I just subscribed to Ben Jordan. I'm a paid subscriber of 404 Media. I donate to my local community newspaper, Oakland Side, who provide clear and timely information about topics like this. You can also check out DFlock, an important resource for seeing where these cameras are set up, and you can even search to see if your vehicle is in one of the databases they've gained access to. Of course, there's the Electronic Frontier Foundation, which has been doing their own investigations, like this one from earlier this month, in which they discovered that cops are searching Flock's databases and listing the only reason for their search using just an ethnic slur. As Jordan points out in his video, Flock isn't the only company that's doing this, so make sure that when you tell your representatives to reject them, you make it clear you mean any automated license plate reader. Feel free to quote Ben Franklin. It's not what he originally meant, though it does remain pertinent. Those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. Hold on, we're not even getting the safety part. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. If you loved the video, please subscribe. And if you think the world could use more videos like this and you happen to have a few bucks laying around, head to patreon.com/Rebecca and join an awesome community of nerds like the people whose names you see on the screen right now. Thanks.